If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce Maguire. An interesting topic today, calling for compassion in dealing with coincidence theorists, with those hopelessly indoctrinated into the cult of state and authority worship and scientism. Indoctrinated since birth by this propaganda and brainwashing and programming to trust so-called authorities and ignore all of history that shows that humans are, of course, corrupt and or fallible. And that's why I think sometimes conspiracy theorists, aka critical thinkers, can be a little bit tough in dealing with some of these people as if they're just brainless sheep. And a lot of times those terms are thrown around for comedic effect and hyperbole. I myself do not consider coincidence theorists literally brainless sheep. It's just an offhand humor. Of course, humor is subjective, and that's another thing. The fact that people need to be reminded of that, that's just... It's stunning in this day and age that people don't understand that humor is subjective. And personally, I find people vying for Dunning-Kruger and psychological projection poster boy status on social media. It's like they get a kick out of proving how silly they are. I find that amusing. I know other people don't. And it's perfectly fine. And people can't handle that I find it amusing. That's perfectly fine. They're entitled to their opinion. But I just, you can cry about it. You can laugh about it. Laughter's the best medicine. I choose to laugh about it. That's just the way my sense of humor is. Obviously, everyone's is not the same. And I, of course, understand that. I don't expect everybody else to find it humorous. But I do. But in general, the challenge of objectivity is something that I think critical thinkers, aka conspiracy theorists, they take that for granted because they've already overcome it, especially if they had overcome that quite some time ago. Some people, they can snap out of their indoctrination in, their teenage years. Other people in their 20s or 30s and 40s. We got some late bloomers, too, in their 60s and 70s coming out of the spell of the idiot box, especially in these pandemic times. Plandemic, whatever you believe it is. Obviously the MINDSHOCK motto is the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. I know a lot of people don't have their devices enabled to receive notifications, so we get comments all the time about, oh, wow, you released 50 more podcasts. We didn't get notifications. So make sure your device allows them to go through. Make sure they're enabled. And then also, you could just go to the channel. Go to youtube.com/MINDSHOCK. Go to videos, and you can see all the podcasts right there. You don't have to wait for notifications. That's probably the easiest way to make sure you keep up to date, as well as being a patron. Patrons do get priority for case topic requests based on your tier. You could also be a guest on the podcast, and you can have any questions answered in priority fashion. You could also check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. And if you like this podcast, hit the like button, share it across social media platforms. Let's spread the message of logic and reason, not these partisan positions where it's encouraged to dogmatically choose sides just for the sake of choosing sides. That's so silly. The whole, if you're not with us, then you're against us, divide and conquer tactics going back to thousands of years ago. You could check out one of my recommended books, of course, is The Art of War by Sun Tzu, to kind of familiarize yourselves with the strategies and tactics of corrupt profiteers, oppressors, rulers, politicians of all kinds. These have been the same tactics since the advent of government. The control of the mind, propaganda and indoctrination, fear-based propaganda for the purpose of control. I'll probably be doing a dedicated podcast on this, but the KGB's actually done studies on this where they have inundated subjects for 2 months with just fear-based propaganda, false information instilling fear and paranoia, i.e. some kind of pandemic. And then after 2 months of just being inundated with these false messages, the subjects were unable to accept reality. So when they were shown definitive proof that these fear-based messages were false, and then they were shown the reality that there is no whatever crisis that they were afraid of, their brains couldn't process it. And that's very interesting. That's also why I always advocate studying basic psychology in addition to logic and reason. Because if you don't know how your own brain works and responds and just these general basics of human psychology for other humans as well, it's going to be difficult to wrap your mind around the truth. Because what is conspiracy theory? Conspiracy theory is basically just harsh truth. That's it. I mean, naive adults who they just really do not comprehend the mind of a psychopath, oppressor, politician, corrupt profiteer, because they're so far removed from that kind of mentality. And we all are. It's kind of like studying serial killers. It's almost like a morbid fascination. But where the line is drawn, if you're a true crime aficionado, you know the basics of how a crime scene is investigated. I mean, if there's no body, that's a problem. If there's no murder weapon, if there's no evidence of any, that's a problem. But when all the evidence is all there, you're not going to deny the crime. You might not be sure who did it, but if you have a body, if you have a warm body, a murder weapon, a surveillance video, you're not going to be denying that it happened. And yet, coincidence theory is all about that, denying all the evidence. Of course, like I said at the beginning, there's conspiracy theorists, aka critical thinkers, can also be very, very harsh because they prioritize the truth, not subjectively perceived politeness. This seems to be a common theme. I actually touch upon this in the Maura Murray investigation. The Maura Murray case, this is very, very prominent with all the narrative steers and trolls online. Their go-to is pretending somebody, or maybe that person really is impolite, but pretending that trumps the truth. That trumps solving the case, getting closure for the case, discussing like the real harsh truth, the logical points of inquiry. They all love shutting it down under the guise of, oh, this person's impolite, that person's impolite. Now, obviously, there are certain trolls that are impolite and don't bring anything to the table. They can be called out, just like all the Dunning-Kruger sufferers who really shouldn't be discussing the case if they're not even at a very young child's level English comprehension, which there's a whole lot of those people. But if you've proved your proficiency and then subjectively perceived impoliteness or even actual impoliteness, if you want to know what happened, you want to get the case solved. It's the same thing for conspiracy theories. Someone who really wants to know the truth, they're not going to be concerned with all these subjectively perceived slights or impoliteness, all these things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. But to a coincidence theorist, they're going to grasp any straws possible to dismiss the possibility that their faith-based worldview that they've been indoctrinated with since birth is not true. And it really is that simple. Conspiracy theory, aka critical thinking, is simply about recognizing the fact that humans are fallible and some humans are corrupt. I mean, that's really all it is when you break it down. I'll probably do a dedicated podcast on just simplifying it completely, because a lot of times you have to simplify it, because especially critical thinkers, not that another thing that the coincidence theorists love to pretend is that conspiracy theorists somehow have secret information. No, that's the whole point. You only need a very, very, very basic grasp of logic, English comprehension, human psychology. Very, very basic. I mean, there are children that understand these things. So, but again, another go-to is pretending that a critical thinker, aka conspiracy theorist, is somehow pretending to be special. They're just pointing out the bleeding obvious. I mean, that's really all it is. It's just not obvious to the thoroughly indoctrinated, to those sticking their heads so far into the sands of ignorance and refusing to pull it out because it's too uncomfortable. They're just too mentally weak, too naive. And I think conspiracy theorists, aka critical thinkers, they don't respect that sometimes. I've probably been guilty of it as well. There needs to be a certain amount of compassion for those that have had logic and reason so completely indoctrinated out of them, they can't, and they're just that mentally weak, they can't do anything about it. So they either need a really, really harsh slap of reality, which you're not going to do over the internet. You might not even be able to do that in person. A lot of that has to come from something that's unique to them that's going to wake them up. Or it's just a slow burn type process where you can just plant the seeds, but you can't expect the tree to grow immediately. It might take years, might take decades, but all you can do is plant those seeds. So I'm just calling and advocating for a certain amount of compassion in dealing with coincidence theorists. I know I like to use them for comedy because their Dunning-Kruger comedy stylings are so amusing. Again, my own subjective sense of humor. But that doesn't mean I don't also, again, let's not fall for black and white fallacies. Just because I find them amusing goofballs doesn't mean I'm not also compassionate to their position. I recognize their mental weakness and indoctrination, and I do try to treat them with kid gloves in a certain respect. I don't want to be disrespectful to young people. Obviously, there are certain young people out there with mental capacities far greater than all of these so-called functioning adults that are walking around assuming competency of these corrupt and infallibility of these corrupt profiteers, either pretending to do science when there's just scientism priests and pretending these corrupt institutions like the CDC aren't corrupt and can't be corrupt under any circumstances. Because that's another thing. Like, coincidence theorists, they like to pretend, oh, yeah, sure, some people do illegal things sometimes, but they would never do a conspiracy of that magnitude. So they're drawing lines in the sand for people they've never met, people they don't understand, and people whose position they are not in or even close. And again, just because I'm laughing at their silliness doesn't mean I'm not compassionate, doesn't mean I don't understand why they're so silly. Of course, it's due to their indoctrination, their programming. When you watch the Idiot Box, I mean, this is science-based as well. I mean, you're talking about putting your brain in alpha brainwave state, which is highly susceptible to influence, particularly when you're watching entertainment. You let your guard down. Those logical guard towers in your brain, they come down when you go to watch, for example, a comedy movie. So all of that propaganda and subliminal messaging in those films and television shows, you don't even know you're getting it. And it's hard to break out of that once you're that far, when you're that far into it. It takes a lot. And as critical thinkers, conspiracy theorists, we really need to understand that and be a bit more compassionate. That doesn't mean we can't be entertained by it. I am highly entertained by the comedic stylings of all of these clueless coincidence theorists out there. But I'm also gathering information on them, like in all my interactions online with these people. I do notice when you point out the harsh, blunt truth, they get triggered instantly. Their subconscious recognizes the truth of this. And I point this out all the time. You can use metrics here. We can use controls. Again, this is what real science is instead of scientism. When you propagate a conspiracy theory like, oh, cars aren't real or phones aren't real, notice how no one gets triggered. Because they know they didn't take that on faith. They know it's empirically, at least subconsciously. Even the silliest goofs, at least subconsciously. Subconsciously. But if you mention something like the moon landing being staged, their subconscious instantly recognizes that they took that on faith from the priests of scientism. Now, not to say it's not true, but the fact that they took it on faith and pretend it's science, they realize that this is their indoctrination to the cult of state and authority worship, or their subconscious does. And that's why they get triggered, and that's why nobody gets triggered over conspiracy theories that can be empirically verified to be false. Nobody gets triggered over them. And yet, all of these other conspiracy theories that are basically up in the air, I mean, you could look at all the major triggering ones, their subconscious, their intuition knows that there's something to it, that the line of inquiry is legitimate, regardless of what the real truth is. And that's why they got triggered, because they took it on faith like brainwashed sheep. Their subconscious recognized it, didn't like it. And this, of course, ties into ego. But just to round this episode out, it's very, very difficult to be objective because of all the programming and indoctrination and brainwashing since birth, the material world, appealing to the ego. Hubris has just taken over. We live in a scientism society. To admit, and people also like the herd mentality that they're indoctrinated into, to admit that society as a whole has made gigantic mistakes, and that they think that they would be stupid in that regard, and then they're not allowed to be stupid. Their ego's got them in such strings. And that's another easy way to differentiate between a critical thinker, aka conspiracy theorist, and a coincidence theorist, someone who has had the logic and reason indoctrinated out of them, is ego. Normally, now again, obviously the main go-to coincidence theorist straw man is to pretend to these hasty generalization and compositional logical fallacy, the tiny, tiny percentage of conspiracy theorists that are actually crazy and believe every single conspiracy with no logic and reason, they pretend that all conspiracies are like, all conspiracy theorists, aka critical thinkers, are like that. Obviously they're not. That's a very, very small percentage. But again, the propaganda has led them to believe that they're these tinfoil kooks. So, anyway, to be this hubris of society and ego manipulation. People don't, as Mark Twain once said, and I haven't said this one in a while, but it's very apt. It's much easier to fool someone than to convince them they've been fooled. So we basically have a society of brainwashed individuals that are brainwashed into thinking they can't be brainwashed. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Now, when you can break through your ego, if you have the mental strength to break through and not be a slave to your ego, to admit that you might be mistaken, you might be hoodwinked, and there's no real shame in that, because when you're indoctrinated at such a young age, you're just bombarded with all this fear-based propaganda and indoctrination to the cult of state authority worship and scientism. I mean, as a small child, it's just... there's no shame in that. It's not your fault. It's the adult's fault for not It's the adult's fault for not prioritizing logic and reason. It's the whole Santa Claus thing all over again. It's very traumatic for some children. It's traumatic to find out there's no Santa Claus, there's no Tooth Fairy. But when you have this culture of lying to children about these fantasies, and it's just nonstop lies, pretending it's for their own good, it's just there's a psychological damage cycle that goes on there, and that's probably a topic for another podcast to get into it deep. But in general, such a population is going to have trouble being objective. A lot of trouble. Aristotle once said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to consider an idea or concept as true without believing in it." And, I mean, that's one of the goals of MINDSHOCK. I mean, the motto, of course, the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. So when I look at any theory, you have to understand the limitations of not only your own mind, but available information. Pretending that there aren't these psychopathic, corrupt profiteers out there. Obviously there are. History has many lessons to teach. And, someone who's overcome their hubris would be ready to learn them. And the rest of them, the coincidence theorists, the sheep, the cognitive dissonant masses, they have a long way to go. But on the bright side, I actually think there's more and more people waking up and breaking out of the spell of the idiot box. Just, on social media alone, even just years ago, there wasn't, the Mr. Smith effect was in full force. When the Matrix sought to protect itself. Anytime you could be having a normal conversation, you can mention 9/11 or vaccines, whatever, automatically there's a switch that gets flipped, and the person that you were talking to, perfectly normal, polite, nice person, all of a sudden, now they're defending the Matrix system, the scientism, the authority worship, the authorities, the oppressors, they can't be wrong. The faith-based paradigm must be true. But I think it's improving, and I think, like all things, it's cyclical. And civilization might come back around. If you haven't checked out the podcast, A Logical World, I actually go over what a world would look like where logic and reason was utilized by all, or nearly all. It's a very interesting world, very interesting podcast, so check that out if you haven't checked it out. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of the MindShock podcast. If you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Make sure your device allows those notifications to come through. And you can also just go to mindshock.com, youtube.com/mindshock, and look through the videos and all the podcasts manually. You can do that. You do not have to wait for notifications. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe. There's a lot of our viewers are not subscribed, so I guess they're just, maybe they don't want a YouTube account. I don't know. You can also check us out, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority, case, topic, co-podcaster requests, logical analyses requests, and get your questions answered in priority fashion. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce Maguire signing off. Catch you guys next time.